we're pleased to have Lindsay Lynch in the role of moderator. Please welcome Lindsay and her team of speakers.
Great, thanks for the introduction. So we are talking about the future of entertainment today, which is pretty broad, but we're hoping to break it down into some interesting discussions and get some best practices for you guys. All right, cool. So I thought we would just start our panel by just meeting our panelists.
Hi, I'm Dave Bakula. I work with the Nielsen Company. I run client development and industry insights, which means that I try to take all of the Nielsen data that we have within entertainment and make it make sense for our clients and help them make better business decisions.
I'm Jason Taffler. I run digital for Rogers. Basically help all of our businesses and brands create great digital experiences. And I've been there for 3 years, so I spent the last decade before that in the US.
I'm John Taylor with Bell Media. I head up our centralized digital product group. So responsible for taking our television, radio, and digital first brands, evolving from being broadcast to digital properties. Very exciting times.
Hey guys, I'm Keith Hernandez with BuzzFeed. My role is VP of International Accounts. What that entails is opening up and expanding BuzzFeed and all the fun that we offer to other markets outside the US.
My name is Michael Dutton. I am with the Associated Press. I head up product and business operations for everything we do in entertainment and lifestyles news.
Okay, great. So one of the things I wanted to start with was just to talk about events in entertainment and sort of what the trends we've seen this year. Obviously, you know, Miley's performance at the VMAs, Pharrell's hit at the Grammys, Ellen's record-breaking selfie at the Oscars. There are a lot of, you know, really big stories that have come out of some of these events. And I wanted to talk to our panelists about what their approach is for covering live events, whether it's concerts or award shows, and how they're measuring success. So we can probably start with Michael, if you want to go first.
For covering live events. Yeah, so, I mean, just a little background on the AP. It's been around since 1846 and services as many as 15,000 media outlets worldwide across all media types, formats, platforms, and so on. So that obviously includes hard news, finance, sports, politics, and so on. And in entertainment, one thing that is interesting about the AP is that we have, in the last 5 to 10 years, really focused more effort on our product development for managing our core news coverage, whether it be in text, photo, or video. And live events such as the Oscars, the Grammys, the Golden Globes, the BAFTAs, any major fashion week around the world are sort of front and center in our coverage planning. The AP is, you know, kind of an anomaly in that it is I guess in this group of panelists here, in that it's a business-to-business operation, and we license out a lot of video, and that includes, obviously, raw fashion feeds and you know, interview cams and so on from red carpets like Oscars. But one area that we've been focused on in the last, 5 years in particular is live streaming that out in a produced, kind of consumer-ready fashion. So we're trying to bring together all of our media formats into single packaging solutions, whether it be a widget for online syndication or a coverage and a programming plan that can be distributed across any platform, whether it be broadcast or what have you, down to mobile. But it is a big, big area of our focus in terms of broadening what we do, not just in the content, but also the packaging.
Okay, cool. And
Yeah.
Keith, adding to that?
Yeah, but BuzzFeed is obsessed with events because the entire mentality of BuzzFeed and the philosophy is, what are people talking about? What are they sharing and having conversations with? And events are the best place for that. When you think about the Grammys, the Oscars, the Super Bowl, a lot of it is less to do with, who won? And more to like, who just fell down? Who just had an embarrassing moment? Who was hilarious? Who said the funniest thing? So we're covering it live at the time, not only on BuzzFeed, but also through Twitter and Facebook, and creating fun memes and creating fun conversations around it. We base most of our material on the assumption that you've probably read the AP story on it already, that you have the facts, and we don't need to kind of go back over everything that you know because you've watched it there as well. So you're looking for that, water cooler moment that you're going to talk to your friends about.
We're going in order, are we?
Yeah. John, go ahead.
We've seen an amazing, the new platform technologies has given an amazing insight into day parting and time of day. It used to be such that the big events, when it was TV driven, it's a primetime thing, and when things happen during the day, like a gold medal game for a hockey event based in Europe, it's going to happen on a Friday afternoon. Now people they don't have to be at a TV, and so there's a real, the truth of the matter is events are driving huge audiences. Now with the digital platforms, you don't need it to be at a particular time. It can happen anywhere, on your phone, whatever. A really interesting stat I can share with you we've done a couple of years of the Super Bowl and the Oscars on CTV, and the Super Bowl, of course, is on a Sunday. And so we thought we put up a little survey. It wasn't a blocker, just to say, do you have a cable subscription? Do you not? We're just trying to get a little sample of who are these people on a Sunday afternoon at 1 in the afternoon. It all starts ramping up to the evening. Why are you not at a TV? So we're just curious, and we figured it'd be pretty small. You've seen the numbers grow substantially, and the percentage of people that have a TV subscription was really high. It was 50% or something. I remember thinking, you have a TV subscription, it's Sunday afternoon, how are you not in front of a giant TV with everyone else? But it just speaks to, it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter if you're at work and it's quiet, the technology is allowing these events to become even bigger, multi-platform, so it's a huge part of our priority list.
Yeah, I guess there's an opportunity to really empower the user to make a choice on how they're going to consume a live event, whether they're going to experience the coverage, say, like a BuzzFeed is providing, or whether they're going to watch an experience that Bell is doing on a mobile device.
It's effectively making them even bigger because you can now, everybody can be included. It's not just a time and place.
And oftentimes they're doing both, if not even 3 or 4 or 5 other things at the exact same time, where they're texting their friends hilarious images they're putting it on Snapchat or WhatsApp, and then also on Twitter. So, the reality of it is that they're not fragmented, they're just multitasking on everything they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, what would you say from Roger's perspective for live?
Yeah, so I'd say obviously as more and more content consumption is on demand and time-lapsed, we're betting big on live events in a few categories. One is obviously sports, which is really the last big bastion of live event viewing, where people really need to watch it the first time it's on, because watching a game after the results is kind of irrelevant. So some of you saw we spent some money on the NHL rights for the next 12 years, so we're hard at work now working on some really interesting cross-platform experiences tied to NHL hockey games, bringing fans closer to the game and the players than ever before, getting them more deeply involved in what happens and all the various camera angles and data and intelligence that comes out of a game. So you'll see a lot more of that this fall. The other thing is we've made some bets on other bigger events like the Grammys, where from the start we're planning it all across platform. Our whole production process has changed. The way we think about radio and magazines has also changed. We have Hello Magazine in Canada as well as one of our assets, and they obviously bet big on the royal family, so we're breaking a lot of royal events online and through mobile and layering on magazine after. And also, I think with the news category, we have City News. We've seen that completely evolve. We've fully integrated the newsrooms now across broadcast and digital, and it's working really well. And just curious, how many of you actually heard about that mansion party last weekend in Toronto? A few. How many of you were actually at the mansion party? So just an example, we had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of unique visitors over the weekend coming on to citynews.ca, on our app, tweeting, because we broke that story, and just that whole local community engagement. We've been having conversations with teens who were at the party. So that whole notion of unplanned live events, how do you actually plan for that, take advantage of it, scale that distribution, and then try to monetize it is pretty interesting.
And David, from your side on music, in terms of measurement for some of these events, what do you see?
Yeah, one of the things, Nielsen's kind of broken out into 2 different sections. One is the watch side and one is the buy side. So we're obsessed with what people watch and what people buy and trying to measure each of those things. And when you think about live events, that's just a perfect scenario for us. The Grammys is a great example to say, we're measuring how many people are watching it at any particular time, what those people look like, and then how does that translate through into what people are doing from a purchase standpoint. And it's amazing to see the power. You think about social, and you think about how these live events, the next day or that night, they're always the most talked about things. Sports is the other one that really competes with them, but music and sports, it's no secret that the most followed social media entities are sports and music. Everybody wants to know what's going on with them. Consumers want to feel engaged with them. the Grammys is a great example where you can take an artist like Adele, who had sold tens of millions of records worldwide, and then a year after her record comes out, she takes home an armful of Grammys and has her biggest sales week ever. So how can you have, you've got an industry that's sitting there going, who doesn't have this Adele album right now? And then she wins 15 million Grammys in one night, and then more people buy it than ever bought it before. So it just shows that you're tapping into different areas of consumers in so many different places, and it's availability, and it's kind of being where the consumer wants to be at any given time. And you're right, it's not about necessarily watching it live. You look at something, and living on the West Coast, unfortunately, you run into this a little bit where, when we talk about TV measurement, we talk about live viewing, we talk about live +3, we talk about live +7. Well, how about live -3? When you're watching Twitter to see who's winning all the awards that you can't watch on TV because you're sitting on the West Coast. That's where you're actually getting, it's less than real time, it's negative real time to be able to watch something before it's actually happening in the traditional way that we watched it before.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Your friends then become your programming guide. They're the new TV guide for you, where I had this happen. You guys remember The Sound of Music on NBC? Did you guys have it up here? I was definitely not going to watch that. There's no way that was going to come on my TV. But then I go on Twitter and everybody's making fun of it and having a laugh at it. I was like, all right, cool, I want to join in. I'm going to watch this. I can think of something funny to say.
How many people watch Sharknado?
What's that? Sharknado, exactly. It becomes, because people are talking about it, it becomes an event and going on. And there's nothing that a marketer can do, a TV channel can do to expect that. They can't foresee that that's going to happen with the show. Maybe Sharknado, maybe they knew they had something there, because that was just epic. But it has become that, where your friends are now saying, you have to watch this. Go take a look at this so that we can talk about it and have a laugh
I love
later.
that we compared Sound of Music to Sharknado. It's great. It's
art.
the future of entertainment.
Both classics in their own
You
right.
can't discredit art.
Yeah.
That's like the BuzzFeed homepage, right?
Sound of Music NATO.
The Sound of Music, yes, it's just like Sharknado. That's probably never been said in one sentence before, I hope.
They're making a second Sharknado movie, so you're partially responsible for that, so that's exciting. Absolutely. So then talking about TV is interesting, because, to your point, TV is a live experience, absolutely. People do, hop onto Twitter and talk with their friends, and, there are all these, different groups for Scandal fans to participate in conversations. But also it is something that can be experienced on demand. So what sort of is your strategy around television, and how do you sort of participate in the conversation? How do you pick and choose, or do you, between being live versus covering it after the fact, and how do those plans differ?
So it's such a big question.
Yes.
It's about as broad as the future of entertainment. I look forward to the panels on the future of religion and breathing. It's so multifaceted. The revolution that's happening in television and / video is kind of from top to bottom. There's a revolution in production, so the cost of making something is coming down while quality is being maintained or going up. There's a whole bucket there that's unlocking a whole lot of new creativity and new funding models and new et cetera that didn't exist before. So you're going to get the opportunity for more content. The trick in there is to make more great content and great stories, and that's ultimately going to be the piece that drives it. There's a revolution in distribution where, kind of like we were talking on events, it doesn't really matter if it's on TV or not, and so a core part of our job and our strategy is to make sure that you can get TV everywhere. TV everywhere as an industry term has some baggage, but ultimately we believe there is a promise to be delivered there, which is you should be able to get your TV everywhere. And what's the definition of TV anymore? That's getting blurred. Ultimately, users get to choose that. That's another revolution, because it used to be a much more passive experience. Sometimes people still choose that. Increasingly, it's an interactive experience or a co-interactive experience where the TV's happening, there's a whole conversation happening. All those things are happening at once. We're basically strategically aligning ourselves down all those paths. The final bucket, which is probably not definitively in our hands, is it's tied up into the complexity of rights. We won't go there with this panel, but the reality of the rights and the complexity of the business terms that fit on what's on what platform, that's probably the biggest challenge we face that is completely boring to this room, and yet ends up being a user-facing piece as to why I can't get this here or this here. CTV or whoever will just wear that, or City will just wear it, but the reality is there's a lot of work happening on the back end to make that reality.
Yeah, and I think usually Bell and Rogers aren't allowed to sit beside each other at panels, but today's an exception.
Where is the blue couch?
I'm glad you have
This is
a bit of red in your shirt,
outrage.
right? Is it red? So I guess it is a complex question. I guess I try to start, believe it or not, even though I'm Rogers, I try to start from a consumer-first perspective. There's so much incredible content out there. There's more and more being created every day by all types of new entrants, by all types of traditional companies. The hardest part is actually how do you make it easy to understand where to access this content, how to get it, and for consumers. I don't think we've cracked the code yet from an industry perspective. We're working on a lot of initiatives around that, from when, the first sort of window when people can actually watch it on TV to catching up to, prior seasons. A consumer shouldn't have to try to figure out where to go, which channel, which platform, in terms of accessing content. So we're working hard on that user experience, how that all comes together. I think the innovation around IP-driven networks and turning TVs into more, dumb screens will ultimately play a big role here when you can actually get websites and apps delivered more easily to a big screen. It opens up a lot of opportunities around personalization, interactivity, monetization, but it's a big problem that we're working hard to solve.
Yeah, as a consumer, I see that. We talked about this a little bit before. I use Apple TV as a predominant source of my entertainment. I'm one of those cool kids that doesn't have cable, but I watch a ton of TV anyway. And that's the reality. Most 18 to 34-year-olds are that way. After a day of quoting Ghostbusters, I wanted to watch the movie Ghostbusters, and I couldn't find it on Apple TV. I went to Netflix, I went to Hulu. Finally, I dug deep and found that Crackle had it, which was awesome. I watched Ghostbusters. But it shouldn't be that experience, right? We're in the 21st century, and it took me a half an hour to find through 10 different video on-demand services where I can watch beautiful Ghostbusters. And that's kind of crazy to think about, that we still make it that hard.
Yeah, it's one of the dramatic differences that we see with music, where music has kind of made the decision to put everything out there everywhere.
Yeah.
You can really find, if you go somewhere and expect to find something with music, you're generally doing it, but with video it's dramatically different, where they're holding that very closely, and it's a giant difference there, and it's really interesting to see how consumers of each have sort of diverged.
I'm amazed to see that our expectation is we should be able to find anything, period. It wasn't that long ago. It was only there linearly when you told you it was going to be there. Definitively, you see it in news and certainly in music as a media, as an entertainment commodity. There is some reality of the size of video. I think it took some growth in the internet and broadband speeds and et cetera for us to get to the point where we should be contemplating, we can deliver as much video as possible. It's funny now because the truth is delivering higher and higher quality TV, so 4K and 8K and the future of that stuff beyond HD. It's actually easier to do, it's just math over the internet, where in existing systems it's more challenging because you have the limitations of what the box is capable of. So you can see it's pushing to the point now we're saying, I can't believe I couldn't find Ghostbusters. This is ridiculous.
We face this challenge all the time in news. What qualifies as a commodity versus premium content? Yeah. So going back to your live events coverage question, we have to gather the news and tell it and get it out to everybody, and that is, whether it be a part of a massive licensing deal or something that we kind of let spread itself around the world by embed. But we also try to, be more solutions oriented, and we'll basically ring fence off certain, pieces of our content for specific use on specific platforms. It's a huge challenge, but on top of the same cost base. So I find it interesting too. I've had the same I had the same problem with trying to find Raiders of the Lost Ark for my 8-year-old who had never seen anything like that. And you couldn't find it on Apple TV, couldn't find it on Xbox Live, couldn't find it on Netflix. You could find Raiders of the Lost Ark 2 and Raiders of the Lost Ark 3, but not the first one. And
did you explain rights to him at that point? Son, sit down. We're talking rights.
So you watched Sharknado instead?
No, we watched Nicolas Cage and National Treasure. seem to do the trick. Anyway, the point is, it is an interesting thing, but the news industry and the music industry share a lot of these issues in terms of content licensing, content packaging, and so on, and you're kind of dovetailing this production of a huge amount of content every day, every week, every month, year, and so on, with the advent of obviously new technologies and new deliveries systems and new experiences, right? So that is one topic that obviously is ongoing, in terms of what the future of entertainment might be and the future of content delivery, etc.
It sounds like we're getting to the place of saying the future of entertainment will have the less barriers to find what you want.
Well, the barriers will be more calculated. They'll be rhyme to the reason. It won't be just like, some mystical reason why you can't find Ghostbusters. It'll be, this is how you get Ghostbusters, and this is what you have to do to get it.
Right. Yeah, the thing we talked about a little bit before was, that only works if it works for everybody in the monetization, everybody in the ecosystem. And for the babiest of baby bands to be able to put something out and put it on a streaming service, if that monetization doesn't work for them, that's an issue there. And that's when it comes into, we're not going to talk about rights like you said, but where it comes into things like legislation. And how do we say to these companies that are providing entertainment and are building their brands on the back of entertainment properties, how do they monetize it so they stay in business? How does the content owner stay in business? How does the musician stay in business? And how does the consumer get a price that they go, you know what, I want to consume it for that price? And that's, I think, the challenge for everybody here.
I think ultimately the consumer is going to drive that revolution, because if they can't get what they want, let's say someone's interested in cooking or nutrition, they can't get what they want in whatever platform, whatever time, from their traditional professional sources. They're going to YouTube, they're going to, the growth in sort of amateur content creators who've turned into professionals is just unbelievable to watch at scale and globally. So I think you're going to be in a place where the consumers are going to drive that just like they did in the music industry.
Quick question. How many people here yesterday watched a YouTube video? Show of hands. Or today, yeah. How many people watched a full television show last night? Much less. Yeah, that's just kind of a daily habit that you can consume a 2 to 3 to maybe 5 minute YouTube video, and it could be a tutorial or it could be something entertaining. But you really do have to carve out part of your day to watch a TV show, and I think that's going to be another interesting part where it's less of this Sunday at 9, Sunday at 10. Twitter's forcing that a little bit. You have to catch those live moments, but oftentimes I'll watch Mad Men on Monday because I'm watching Game of Thrones on Sunday, and I don't need that much intensity in one night.
Yeah, I thought, but exactly, I think the same thing, where there's a couple of shows that I watch. I know what network they're on because I have to go to the right app, but I have no idea what day they're on. I have no idea what time they're on. I don't care. I just know that when I go to my app, I can find the latest episode there, and that's when I'm going to catch up when I have time to catch up.
But it's a good question around search and discovery. So with all this content out there, all these different places to get it, when you have a free couple hours, let's say, which probably isn't too often, do you know that you're going to actually go look for a TV show or a movie, or are you interested in something and you just want to find what's there?
Like, how important are recommendations versus sort of your intent, I guess, before you watch something?
Yeah, I think, first here, guys, you're going to learn a lot about my TV habits today. This is great. That was this whole panel was set up like,
let's keep watching.
The first tier is the shows that I have intent, and then the second one is what have I heard, especially, our BuzzFeed editors are telling me a lot. Like Hannibal's a show that all of my BuzzFeed writers are telling me you have to get into. It's super fun. Haven't done it. Scandal, sorry. Haven't done Scandal yet. but that's a show that people are obsessed with. Recommendations is a really tough one, and we talked a little bit about this before. I'm not necessarily a believer that I want an algorithm to continue to recommend more and more for me, because I get a little bit scared of that. If all I was getting was these shows about alcoholics failing at their job and cheating on their wives, I would be in a really bad mood. Like, I just need one of those shows. I don't need, if you like that, here's 10 more to depress you. So I do like the human element of it, and that's where I think social media plays such a great part, where you can have the human emotions from your friends saying, I cannot believe you haven't watched this. Watch 2 episodes, and then we're going to go out and grab a drink and talk about it.
I think it's going to be definitively, you're going to have the social feed, you're going to have your friends tell you. You're probably also going to want someone, a programmer or curator, and you're going to see that in radio, but you're also going to see it in TV. You may also want an algorithm because it speaks to you more than your friend's network does, because things that your friends like isn't always what you like in terms of media. And then you're probably just going to have even a much more passive, and I think the reality is it's not going to be any one of those winners. We have to embrace the fact it's going to be all of those, and our job and our strategy is to make sure as an owner and a license holder of content in the country is to make sure that we're there all the places for that moment of truth decision where you're not quite sure. We have to be open to your friends influencing you and also be there for you with the curation when you want it, and also be there when you passively just know you're going to turn on TMN or HBO because you recognize that brand speaks to you in a way that you're open to something new.
That is interesting, the change that is happening in terms of awareness. I think it's your friends network, but for me in House of Cards on Netflix, for example, I was not opposed to watching TV that way or whatever. Now it's almost the only way I do it. And it was not just my friends, it was the phenomenon reaches the news, it reaches social awareness, you become aware. And so those folks, the programmers at Netflix and Hulu and the rest, they're living for what's happening right now, which is this habit change. We are now I know. So for me, House of Cards, great hit, boom. I will go back to Netflix every time to look for the next House of Cards. And once you're in there, they can promote and sell the next show all day long. That's what's different. It's not. So it wasn't just about my, however many friends I have on Facebook, 693, whatever it is. That's small, man. It's about changing the habit, and I think that is what's happening. And you're right, it's not about carving out an hour every Sunday night at 9 o'clock just to watch whatever show.
Yeah.
It's about knowing you can go to Netflix and find it. I saw this interview just recently with Kevin Spacey. He was saying, the game has changed. Watching TV is like reading a book was way back when. You can put it down when you want, you can pick it up when you want, you can read as much or as little as you want, you can go back. And that's kind of what's an interesting shift I think is happening.
We should be remiss, we would be remiss not to mention the buzz trend of binge viewing.
Absolutely.
Which is so we've talked about that hour. Now you all know, because you've all done it, you start with an hour and then you end up several hours later going, what time? Oh, what time is it? What happened? I just couldn't stop with the cliffhangers and keep going. That's a new phenomenon, and it's going to increase. You're going to see the trend of people starting in one place and staying with it because the storylines are leading them that way, or the news is leading them down that path. They need more and more details on that news event. So that's a critical piece that technology's allowed for, that's changed the way we program.
I think most companies, including ours, are spending a lot of time trying to more deeply understand our customers, our audiences, their needs, their interests from all different types of sources, and really try to figure out what type of content do they want, what type of services do they want. I'll give you one example. How many of you have heard of Next Issue, the magazine, the Netflix for Magazines offering? So we brought that to Canada a few months back. It's doing very well. But even that has 100 of the top magazines in the world, 6,000 back issues in one app for $10 to $15 a month if you want to buy it. But the amazing thing is, even if you have Vogue, Vanity Fair, Maclean's, all these great magazines in there, a lot of people are actually reading more articles, reading more magazines cover to cover than ever before, but they're also wondering what else is out there in this vast pool of content. So part of our jobs, whether it's video, whether it's text, whether it's images, is to try to pull all this data together, create metadata around it, and try to segment it in a way where we can actually feed recommendations and more personalized content to each individual user. And the example I give there is, do you really have time at this point to actually go and read through every single issue of Vanity Fair, or do you want to actually be alerted anytime there's something of interest to you on, let's say, Russia? And otherwise, you're going to miss it. I've said the fundamental TV and magazine and radio model is broken in some ways because I actually want to know anytime there is an article on Russia, but otherwise I'm going to miss all those great experiences and content. So we're working hard on that problem, and you'll see the next version of that application has a lot more around search and discovery and recommendations.
Yeah, you see that in music a lot. Obviously, there's a ton of great music out there that you look back at the traditional ways to market and to expose people to music has always sort of been radio. You think back and radio was it. And how are you going to get your music heard? Well, I got to get on radio. Well, okay, now you're not on radio. What's your plan B? And for a long time, there really wasn't a great plan B. Now plan B is just as good, if not better, than plan A in a lot of cases, where, you know what, I'm going to be here on social media, I'm going to get in this particular soundtrack, I'm going to do a commercial here, I'm going to be heard and marketed in ways that I didn't have the opportunity to do before. And that's one of the places where I think you can see a lot of this great music that never would get discovered in the past getting discovered now. And these recommendation engines, I think, are a great way to do that, to say, hey, you know what, you love a particular band, here's a whole bunch of bands that you might not have ever heard of, that we're never going to get on radio necessarily, that sound just like them or have a lot of the same elements of them. And that's where, you know, people can talk about sort of that you know, the 80-20 rule of all the successful stuff is up here and it's got a ton of radio and a ton of other things going on. But that long tail is getting longer, but I also think it's going to get fatter. I also think it's going to get better, where people are getting pushed in a direction to say, I love this, give me a whole bunch of other things that are just like it. In every form of content that we have here, I think that's going to be the case, is that there's going to be more great content produced because the ability to get discovered isn't limited to just one way anymore.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it sounds like we talk about the challenges with rights, which need to be removed or addressed separately from this discussion, but that also we think about product and the changes that you're making there. So, you know, recommendation engines are one thing, but what is like the human element that we add to it? So if you're building, you like shows, you discover them from your friends, from your social networks. As organizations, how do you employ people to help create awareness for your brands? Like, do you build community managers? Do you rely on that organically? What do you do outside of your product?
I think when we think about how we differentiate versus Netflix or others, we want to add that human element. We're very focused on curation, whether across any of our businesses. I think originally, I've been in digital for over 15 years, originally it was sort of always left to the experts and the specialists, the webmasters, the social media, community managers. I think what we've seen over the past few years, we evolved as an organization. We now have centers of excellence that have subject matter experts with best practices training, know all the tools and platforms, but we've actually spent a lot of time reintegrating and embedding and training people across all the various editorial, production, marketing teams, and that's worked really well. Because I think otherwise you're sort of off on the side and not really leveraging in an integrated way. We've actually integrated our newsrooms. We've integrated our magazine editorial groups again. I'll give you an example of Sportsnet, our multi-platform sports property. When we integrated the editorial groups across broadcast, print, digital, our traffic went through the roof. We went from 1,000 pieces of content a month to 5 times that. And when we actually got the editors trained on social media and they became passionate about it, we saw our social traffic go through the roof almost immediately because the quality of those posts and tweets were so much higher. So I'd say big fan of having some specialists in a center, but really, today's parent just passed 500,000 Twitter followers. For Canada, that's pretty huge. It's because the publisher, the editor, all the journalists, they're living and breathing it every day, and you can't force that.
So fully second that. It has to be, it can't be ghettoized. Social has to be integrated into all of the aspects of what you do. The newsroom is probably the best example. CP24 was our leading edge in those strategies, and it wasn't a separate community team. It was everybody that works at CP24, and it became part of their brand. You've probably seen the tags, Canada's most followed newsroom. So the Toronto-based newsroom became a big social juggernaut for us. The payoffs for that, of course, is you get that interactive piece with your audience. They've come and asked you for it, and now you're integrated as they're part of the newsroom. We spun out a couple of years ago, and it's growing and evolving, the My News piece, which is now we're saying you give us your news, you're part of this thing. We've had so many pieces of content now that's it came from the user as part of the newsroom, so we have to have that open door. The pitfall, of course, the challenge to avoid really is not just respecting the complexity of it's really social is a personal experience, and it's ultimately a network of friends. And I think there's been stumbles, in the past years where you try to build your own social hub, or you try to insert yourself too heavily, marketing-wise or et cetera, into someone's network once you have them. It's their network. They're choosing to be with you, and we have our job is to provide the the social network that chooses to follow us and be with us, what they're keen to us for, which is, in CP24's case, the breaking news, the stuff specific to Toronto. It's a very, if you come in with all what's about me and I'm marketing and here's how I need you to come to me, etc., it completely will not work. You can't build your own hub. You have to seamlessly fit yourself in and become part of the community.
Yeah, knowing the tone of the social network that you're on and speaking in that language makes so much sense. You know, I hope the way you talk on LinkedIn is not the way that you're talking on Tumblr or Pinterest, or you either have a really wacky LinkedIn account or a really boring Tumblr and Twitter. But you know, you think about that. You know, as a human being, you think, okay, this is the way I'm expressing myself on each one of these. Here I'm buttoned up. Here I'm a little bit kooky. Same way as your brand should do it. Same way that you know, you should market your show or you should market your band. Be human with it and have that conversation and share those elements. You know, on our editorial team, we have a huge community manager team that collaborates and helps disseminate the stories that our editorial team is doing. But then we also have a business side that works with a lot of partners. We actually have worked with Rogers and we worked with Bell to help push out what they're doing. So a great example of that is for Game of Thrones and the new season starting. We created a quiz, how would you die on Game of Thrones? I died by beheading. I was too loyal to my family. They got in the way of all the missions that I wanted to go on. My coworker got molten gold on top of his head. Really, really brutal quiz. But the idea behind that was to get the conversation going. And you know, for us on the promotional side, this was to get the conversation going that Game of Thrones is back. You better get ready. It's exciting. But it also let it be in the hands of the audience. So that quiz got over 2 million views and over 2 million people took that quiz because the fans of Game of Thrones then took it and as their own. They took the identity of it and took it off themselves. Where HBO didn't have to sell that Game of Thrones is coming back Sunday at 10 p.m. They let the fans do that for them and they let them have the conversation on how they're going to celebrate that.
I can just add a little bit to all of that. I mean, at AP in the newsroom, we do a lot of that same exact approach. But social media for a company like AP is new territory, but we've built out a hub of folks in the newsroom who are responsible for building out our Facebook audiences, our Twitter following, and so on. Last year, in fact, our Twitter account got hacked and, you know, caused all, you know, fictitious stories at the White House and whatnot. But the way we went about it was just basically to leverage the journalists themselves. So as part of the news gathering process, tweeting and Facebook posting have become standard. And there are some people that make, you know, that's part of their primary job is to sit in a theater and tweet out what's happening in real time as part of, you know, either writing an article, shooting videos, shooting photos, and so on. So we're trying to integrate it into what is a B2B, you know, news content operation, but we are getting more consumer minded. So we have a couple of different platforms, AP Mobile being one of them, our YouTube channel being another. So we are straddling the fence between a consumer type of approach as well as keeping our customers and our publishers around the world, you know, in mind as far as getting them content that they can then tweet out or retweet or, you know, build stories around in social. So that's how we bring it up.
Yeah, the key piece in there, which I think we're all sort of driving our strategies to keep aligned, is it's got to be authentic. And so when you have a separate team doing it, they're the community or marketing team. When you have the writer or the editor or that person who's directly involved in it, then it's authentic. And I love when we see our fans with Game of Thrones, or we see our fans of Big Bang or whatever it is, and they own it, they take it, and they run with it. It's a little, I think it's unnerving, probably for, you know, our marketing team, where we're used to controlling messaging, but it's amazing how creative and organic things will happen, and when you let that go, the experience for the fan is heightened. It's not less. They love and hate a show. They're passionate about it. Yeah. When they say they're mad about this or a judge decision on The Voice, it's because they love the show. They watch the show, they love the show. So we got to be careful about.
This is a little tip from Zay Frank, who leads our video team. Anytime you want to do user-generated or get people excited to create their own, do it kind of sucky yourself. And they'll want to one-up you. Have you ever seen that? Especially with Game of Thrones, we did this user-generated thing, like show us we dressed up kind of horribly. Then you see what everybody else does, and they didn't take ownership of it. It becomes their pride that they beat the professional and doing something awesome.
Yeah, it's consumer engagement. It's really about building that engagement. It's the same, again, it's across music, it's across TV, it's across news, it's everything. It's how do you get that consumer engaged more in what you're delivering to them, and the ability to, user-generated content's a great example with music, where you get, take Bauer's Harlem Shake, which was by far the most streamed song last year. It wasn't all about that song. Not many people bought that song. Not many people wanted to hear that song. Radio certainly wasn't big on that song. But the user-generated content of, hey, why don't the four of us get together and do the Harlem Shake? Okay, great. We'll put a video up and everybody at AP will watch it. Okay, great. It's that kind of thing that makes people feel like they're a part of it, makes people engaged with it, and all of a sudden, and that's where not just the whole going viral thing, but the authenticity of it comes through in something like that, where people are so invested. It's almost like wearing a band t-shirt. I'm a fan of this, and here's how I prove it.
Yeah, it is like a badge, I guess, that people put on themselves by investing in their favorite things. So a couple of trends that we're sort of talking about around personalization, obviously authenticity and providing choice, whether people are going to binge watch something or watch it live, making it accessible on all devices. I mean, it's a pretty broad topic to begin with. Are there any other things that you think you are planning to invest in the next 6 to 12 months, or areas where you're hoping to win in entertainment? Or is it really sort of across everything? We no longer think about a social media strategy, we just think about a strategy.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. Yeah. I don't know how many people were in New York last week for any of the upfront, new front goings on. But I went to the YouTube brandcast and the Hulu, upfront and whatnot, and what I noticed was an alignment between what we're thinking about strategically in-house at AP and in entertainment in particular about providing more programmatic content for, like a Maker Studios or other companies out there that are really gathering these huge distribution networks and these bubbles, and finding ways of getting our news content woven into the programming that goes across these networks. So Hulu, for example, pushing, total full-blown entertainment, Seth Meyers and others kind of baked into the mix along with alongside their traditional entertainment or content efforts on TV and whatnot. So that works. So it's how do we tap more program? How do we take the AP news and create programming around it in a way that is consumer-facing, but obviously for distribution through a media network? Just as an example of something that kind of speaks to this strategy, we just did a deal with Morgan Spurlock and the Warrior Poets guys, so the whole Super Size Me team, for the purpose of basically developing programming. The other area is how do we tailor our coverage planning to speak to the new world order of things out there. So it's not just about covering TV and film and Broadway. We have to do a better job of covering new media. And so that is, what I'm seeing is just these huge stories. You've got your Michelle Pfans, your iJustines, your, Bethany Mottos, all these people who are like emerging with huge fan bases that are a marketer's dream. And I'm trying to, make sure that from our operation at AP that we're able to dovetail our coverage planning, our output with these platforms and these celebrities, if you will, to better help them reach their marketers and so on.
So specific to TV, we just touched on the premise of TV everywhere, but one of the major trends you're going to see is how easy it is becoming to take whatever it is on the internet and see it on a big screen, on whatever screen you want. And that jump to the TV is becoming easier and easier and easier, in part because companies like ours are embracing apps and including native apps on Xboxes and gaming consoles, and smart TVs, etc. But also because the technology is just getting easier. And I remember, CS 2 years ago and thinking, I don't know what, everyone's still running different directions. And then next year it was slightly better. And this year I remember thinking, okay, this is getting way better. You don't need to make 50 native apps. There's single source abstraction tools that can get you to multiple platform. And by the way, there's things like Apple TV and Chromecast And I don't know if you've ever heard of a protocol called Dial, but it's an open source equivalent. I won't plug the manufacturer, but someone was telling me that they were in their house with the same smart TV and the same phone manufacturer, and they went to watch something, and the phone just said, "Oh, did you want to watch this on your TV?" They didn't install anything. They didn't ask for anything. It just said, "Yes, you're on the same Wi-Fi network." Check mark. That is going to become that is a big. You could describe it as the cliche game changer, but ultimately, one of the major differences is going to be that technology barrier is going away, at which point internet TV is just on your TV. And that's something, and all that interactivity now is on the big screen. And you now have a device in one hand and you're watching on the big screen. So that's a trend. You could do a whole panel just on that, but that's a very exciting trend that's changing everything in 2014.
From our standpoint, I think it's all about measuring and defining success and giving people the tools to look at a very early indicator and say early on, it looks like I have something here that could be successful. It's broadening the measurement of engagement, of discovery, of consumption, of purchase in some cases and not in other cases. But it's the ability to be able to go in and say, here's a metric that is so forward-looking and so predictive, and it's happening 10 weeks before I might actually have the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here, to be able to look at that and say, this is the first metric that informs me that I've got something here, that I'm going to be successful here. So from a content owner standpoint, they can look at that and go, you know what, I want to double down on this particular thing, or I want to sign this particular artist. It's all the different metrics that are in there. And again, it's not just about looking at radio or looking at sales or looking at social or looking at streaming. It's looking at all of these things in together in one place and connecting them together and saying, how does this change here impact this change here? And from a music standpoint, to be able to look at the entire sphere of what's going on with it, with the consumers and with the engagement, that's going to be what's really going to predict what's going to be successful.
And we have a lot going on, but there are signs in our building that said 153 days till puck drop. So we're spending a lot of time on hockey, and so the biggest thing for our teams is surprising and delighting Canadians and Rogers customers later this year with some really awesome integrated experiences, whether on your smartphone, your tablet, your PC, or watching TV. So look for more to come there.
Video is a huge priority for us this year. We participated in the New Fronts for the first time this year. And the major question we're asking internally is, how can we create shareable video that goes above and beyond consumable video? How do we prove that out? How do we find the metrics that show success of somebody taking it? Because a lot of times, video right now, especially YouTube, is a one-to-one share. You're sending an IM, you have to watch this, or you're sending an email. How can we prove out that this video is not only something that one person sat back and leaned in and watched, but they've then taken the next step and shared it with their friends. So yeah, video, we know TV's not going anywhere. We love TV, and we love the entertainment teams that are putting together great stories. What we're thinking about is that 5 minutes before your show is about to start. That 7 minutes in between the two shows that you love on Sunday night. What are you doing with that time? And can we create an entertaining experience on BuzzFeed?
Great. So we have a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to throw it out to the audience for any questions.
I was surprised to hear Keith talk about Ghostbusters not being available, so I had to check on iTunes. It turns out it's available, but only for purchase for like $19.99.
Didn't want to do that, man.
Which surprised me, because it's a 30-year-old movie, long past its so-called sell-through window. I was just wondering if the rights holders for film and TV shows are really, their business models are advantageous to where the consumers are going. Like, what is a movie worth, like a one-off movie viewing worth? Or what is a whole series, a whole season of a TV series worth? I'm a Bell customer. Sorry, Roger. Sorry, Jason. So I don't get FX, so I don't get to watch The Americans. I saw season 1. Somebody lent me the DVD. I'm not watching season 2 because it's too difficult or too expensive. It's not worth $35 for me to watch it on iTunes. So generally, just to the panel, are the suppliers smart about how they're pricing their shows and their films these days?
That could be a 3-day panel on its own right. And if you're a hockey fan, you might want to switch to Rogers. But what I'd say is, I don't think they're fully there yet. I think they're making progress. It's a very complex area. I think the one thing we can help with, though, is the more data and information we have on what people are interested, what demand they have, what their viewing habits are, trying to value content like Netflix does based on actual interest viewership versus just historical rate cards that may or may not be relevant anymore, I think is helpful. But I think they're making progress, but there's a long way to go.
The promising notion I've heard here is I used to make the statement that we haven't talked about the issue of piracy. So because you found it on Crackle and you found it on iTunes, and so our job is really basically to keep filling in that white space. And I've always said that the best defense against piracy, and you can't find the thing you're looking for, is really to make a great product that has everything in it, it's easy to access. And I think you could currently go pirate anything on iTunes today and anything, on the streaming radio services or, et cetera. But the fact that those exist, or even in Netflix, the fact that those exist as business models means you don't have to go do those things. So that's in part, we'll never be able to answer the specifics about Ghostbusters from the supplier. I think there's a challenge that we face as an industry to make it simpler, and yet I do respect the fact that it costs money to make those shows, and they have a monetization plan and revenue, and we have to respect it. There's a big difference, though, between an ownership. So iTunes and what you're describing is because someone wants to own something is very different than someone wants to just watch it. And you'll see even on sports, people will own event-type sports, and they'll buy it. They'll buy the Olympics because they want to own a piece of that. But they'll watch, any random game. So you can see the complexities. There's no real answer coming from this panel, but I thought there was a clear distinction between watching and owning that might be valuable.
Hi guys, I work for a global music organization, and we went from infancy 2 years ago in the digital media area to a place where we've now carved out a pretty good audience with good engagement. Keith, you touched on it a little bit. You said you had a very large team working towards this. I'm very curious about the size of your team and how you guys value digital media contributing towards the future of entertainment.
Yeah, real quickly, the overall BuzzFeed team is close to 500. On the editorial side, it's about 250 across, I think we're in close to 10 different countries now. On the social media side, there's about 10 to 15 community moderators, people that are working with the editors on how they should disperse their information. So it's a pretty big team, and I don't know if you can get that way everywhere, but social is our focus.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.